Hi, today I'm going to discuss at length about why some autistic people do better with less time outdoors and more screen time. This is a grave heresy on the left and a lot of times within earth religions. So, you know the official doctrine. The kids need to go outside. Richard Louv says, "Last child in the woods." We would is a threat of happening. We need to get to rewild kids by connecting them once again to the non-human world by putting them outdoors and taking them away from so many screens. And they say that science backs it with studies saying that kids who spend too much screen time and not enough time outdoors have behavior problems, cringe, learning disabilities, cringe, developmental delays, cringe, extra aggression, cringe, psychosis, cringe. Can't you see? I'm sure you can see the ableism in those criticisms of kids who get more screen time and less time outdoors. Now, I am in the process of writing, among other things, a college level proposal to Jill Stein to possibly, show her, to teach her more about what it means to be autistic, that it's not a disease, it's a race, it's who we are. And one of those things that, she really needs to learn is that sometimes it's okay for kids to spend more time on screens and less time or no time talking to each other. Now, I can't necessarily blame her because that's the rhetoric that the earth religion and left wing have been talking about for years, like since the 60s. But allow me to explain. I, for one, love being outdoors. I am physically able to go outside. I don't have mobility issues that limit my going outside. And I don't have emotional or other neurological issues that make it painful or stressful for me to go outside. So, the argument can be made that anyone, pure human or hybrid, human-animal hybrid, should and can go outside, should spend more time outdoors, maybe a little less time on screens, although that too is debatable. I'll get to that later. And that we should, and that, if those of us who can go outside into nature, then that will make humanity as a whole less human-centered and can connect those of us who are hybrid souls with our non-human selves. Now, I kind of agree with this. However, if other autistics say that I'm wrong about even that even neurotypical kids have the right to more screen time and less time outdoors, depending on who it is, or even anyone, please let me know in the comments. Thanks. So, so I love to hike. I love being out in nature. I love to hug trees and to have like butterflies and other bugs and amphibians, perch on me. So I love to see wild animals, foxes, coyotes, deer, eagles out in the wild. There's no better experience than that, I think, in some ways. So, yeah. So I am a big proponent of being outside. However, some people with disabilities, such as autism, have physical mobility issues that limit their going outside. And obviously there are people who are in wheelchairs or people with other mobility issues whose outdoor time is limited. And should they be forced to spend less time on screens since they can't really go outside anyway? I say not. The argument could be made, yeah, well, they could just read more. Yeah, but, if you can't go outside, then having to just read and spend less screen time, for one thing, that could be terribly boring for some, and thus that would be emotional and psychological torture in some ways to some. So yeah, by all means, those people have every right to spend more time with video games, TV, movies, and computers. And the far left and earth religious people have no right to take that away from them. Second, some people with autism and other disabilities might have fear or stress or pain issues with going outside. I'm really not too sure about exactly what those issues are, but if somebody does, then they do have the right to more screen time and less time outdoors. So, In addition, autistic children should not be repeatedly forced to socialize and to talk to each other. They shouldn't have their internet time taken away and then be forced to talk to each other. For one thing, I, for one, am very social. Like I said in my previous video, I'm the leader of a human-animal hybrid pack. So, as of course I have a lot of fellow pack members, I talk to them a lot, and I've got a lot of friends. And for one thing, I live in an area that is full of like-minded people. Now, the same would not be said for somebody who lives in a more conservative area, especially now in the U.S. and a lot of those red areas. Really hard for like an autistic child to be able to talk to anybody who's like-minded there. So, and I was in high school. I was taken away from ABA. Luckily, I was freed from ABA when I get into high school, but it took me a long time, like I said in the previous video, to actually realize I was still being discriminated against in high school. I was still being put through social pragmatics and pressured to make friends with a lot of the kids in high school who I had absolutely no connection to, nothing that I was interested in, they were interested in, and yet I was still pressured and almost forced to make friends with them. So I didn't. But I know a lot of like-minded people, and even if you do know like-minded people and you're autistic, you still have the right to not be social, to be a loner. If you want to only communicate with other like-minded people over the internet, it's your right. That's the only option for a lot of autistic people, especially kids, in, like I said, in conservative areas. And then what if they're in third world countries that are even more conservative than the US in general is? And of course they're going to need that, provided they have access to it, which and I will just say, I don't care if this sounds offensive. Yes, of course, kids in the third world need the basic necessities that they sometimes lack. But if they're autistic, they also have a need, as much of a need and as much of a right, to the tools and details that I described in my video about how Earth religion and the left can be ableist. Of course, in order to get those things, they absolutely need the basic necessities, but then once they get the basic necessities, they absolutely need their tools, their details that they find meaningful, that give their life meaning and purpose. And so, in turn, they also need advanced technology. If they really do better without being outdoors and more time on screens, that is their same right. And that, for one, is why, feeding hungry kids and, stopping third world diseases is really important in another way. So if you try thinking about it that way if you're a lefty who thinks that, oh, I'm being so selfish, greedy, and materialistic because I care more about my mocha latte than I do about kids who don't get their shots. You need the shots to get the mocha latte. So, yeah. So, anyway. So, I don't know, again, too much about how the outdoors could cause stress, pain, or fear. I know and I can understand why socializing can cause it. Now, like I said before, autistic people, including autistic kids, in fact, especially autistic kids, have, if they want, they can be total loners. They don't even need to communicate with anybody, So, it's just that, they might, maybe they won't, but maybe they do want to be social. They just get nervous by actually talking to people in real life, or they live in a place where all the people in real life are not like-minded and could discriminate against their interests, their tools, and their details that give them meaning and purpose. So in that case, they have every right to communicate online. Now, of course, parents need to make sure that they're safe online, monitor what sites they go to, of course, make sure they don't go to any dangerous or unauthorized sites or sites not meant for kids. But if you apply those safety rules, then it's fine. So, let me see. Yeah. So, as I said, I don't communicate. I don't let anybody into my pack who, I do let some pure humans into my pack as long as they respect us for who we are and accept who we are, in all the tools and details that give us meaning and purpose, if we do have those things that give us meaning and purpose. If, somebody is not like-minded and discriminates against us for being Therian, furry, otherkin, or disabled, I don't allow them in. That's how I am. In high school, I was kind of forced to allow them in. I was pressured to, make friends with people, with other kids who I did not relate to, but I no longer do that anymore. So, and as for going outside, well, do I spend more screen time than the left and a lot of people who are in touch with the earth say I should? Yes. I do a lot of time outdoors. I do 2 hours of exercise, usually outdoors if I can do it, every day. But I also constantly go onto the internet. You can kind of tell since I'm on YouTube a lot. So, yes, I think that anybody, even if they can and should be outdoors, also has the right to a lot of screen time, as much as they want, in fact. I'm sure that those studies that say that more screen time for kids makes them psychotic in XYZ, ableist slurs, is not true. They probably don't become psychotic. I wouldn't say that they would, because that is probably a study that is seen from an ableist, neurotypical, centric perspective. So maybe they might appear psychotic, but they might just be displaying autistic behavior that their neurotypical parents or, doctors or teachers are discriminating against. Scientists need to study the actual effects of screen time on children, all children, objectively, without personal bias, without ableism clouding up the lens. And that's the real problem. That is where Jill Stein, gets it wrong. I am really hoping that the proposal I send to her and videos such as this on my YouTube channel can convince her to, see things from a different eye. So, now another thing I was going to talk about. If you are Therian, furry, or otherkin, and you have physical or emotional issues that keep you from going outdoors, you can still have the right to be furry, Therian, or otherkin, and you can get in touch with your non-human self through a myriad of TV shows, movies, video games, websites, excuse me, that are about Therians, otherkin, furries, non-human animals, and that often have very earth-centered, philosophical ideas that are very in line with what Wicca, what, shamanism teach. And there are actually a lot of video games that are completely, Therian themed or furry themed, so that's one thing that they could look for. In addition, if you're Therian, furry, or otherkin and you can't spend time outdoors and you need more screen time, you could also connect to your non-human self with having companion animals. That is, of course, provided you have the time and the money to care for one. I am not one to say go out and buy a pet. Don't buy at all. In fact, adopt, don't buy, but don't go out and even adopt a pet just on a whim to connect you with your non-human side unless you know how to take care of a pet, you've done the research on how to take care of a pet, and you have the time and money to take care of a pet. But if you do those things and you decide that a companion animal is a really good, choice to connect with your non-human side, that is an option. You could also, if you're able to go outside in your backyard, you could communicate with the trees and the grass just in your backyard and just with the animals who come into your backyard. You could have grow a few plants or maybe grow a garden if you can. There's indoor mushroom growing kits where you can grow edible mushrooms to eat indoors. There's a lot of stuff, ways you can connect with your non-human self without necessarily hiking outdoors if you really can't hike outdoors. So, I'd like everyone to keep that in mind. So, good night.